Welcome to MentorTime, everybody. Today we're going to talk about don't undersell yourself, claim your credit. Now, I know we covered this last year, but I've been working through the edits in the book I'm writing, and a lot of it's at the beginning, especially about underselling yourself. And I put this back on the schedule because I thought it was important to talk about things I've found that we don't talk about so much in underselling. So this will be a slightly different take on it and different slides. All right, as always, we start with your takeaway. No surprise, I say all the time, claim your credit. It's okay to claim your credit, and then you can stand in your brilliance or move forward in your brilliance. I'm just curious if you'll put in the chat, how confident do you feel about describing your achievements? And this can be anywhere, in front of people, in front of your family, whatever. No value judgment. I'm just curious about those who are here right now. 1, not confident. 2, somewhat. 3, very. I hope you'll give yourselves more credit. Thank you for the 3 and the 2. I think that 2 deserves a 3, but we'll see. All right, so here's some of the things that I'm still hearing. I have a small population out of all the people I work with in transition who are primarily women, but some men who come in their mid 40s to mid 50s and tell me, literally, one of the people last year who contacted me said, Sue, literally overnight, I went from being valued to sidelined. I wasn't asked to go to meetings, even though I was still part of the management team, whatever. It's hard. We know that people produce results for clients and can't always take credit, or it isn't on there. Sometimes names appear on government documents, for example, and all of us who are on here live today have had government experience where me as a contractor, Peter as a contractor, and other positions, and Ron as an employee of the Canadian government, you can't always say what you've actually give the details of it, but you usually can talk about it. And we still have a lot of people who get out of graduate school or undergraduate because more and more people are doing targeted degrees in undergraduate, such as a Bachelor of Science in Public Health or a Bachelor of Science in Social Work, for example. And they say, Sue, I'm so junior, I really don't have experience, when it turns out they'd have a lot. All right, so how are we going to get there today? We're going to talk about why do we undersell ourselves, and I'll give you some of the science behind it. And then how do you really claim your credit, Sue? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing it? And then finally, what should you do? All right, so get started with why do we undersell ourselves? A lot of it comes from the fact that now in an online world, we know where we want to go long term or even short term, where we want to get to. But we're drowning in advice. When I first started doing mentoring 3 decades ago, it was because the people I worked with in various development settings around the world didn't have access to the same written materials I had, which were journals, popular magazines, and newspapers, and then whatever on the radio and TV mostly. So there was still in those days finite information, but you had to know someone who could tell you about it. Nowadays, everybody has everything online and in person. I don't know how people keep up on everything. I try to keep up on a lot, but I'm only focused right now in the immediate job seeking. I stepped back from interview prep and other things like that, although I do it occasionally, because there was so much that came into it, and even more, it's accumulating. But the real problem underlying this is people don't know their own value. But that's not that they don't know their own value. All the advice assumes that they know how to articulate their value, that they understand and can explain what they bring to the table. It also assumes that you are comfortable talking about your accomplishments. And when I've talked about this before and with individual clients, They will tell me, Sue, I was raised in a family where you were supposed to be very humble. One Latina woman said to me, I can't even tell my parents I won this huge award because they'll think I'm bragging. So it's cultural, it's geographical, it's also in your own self. How comfortable do you feel in doing it? Because it does feel like bragging sometimes. I want to show you a continuum I've developed since last year when we talked about this. And I call it from underselling to stand in your brilliance. At one point, I was saying from underselling to sold, but I couldn't quite make that work the way I wanted it to. All right, so the first continuum, and for those of you who are in public health or in learning and development, teaching, this is really the behavior change continuum. Very much, you will see very much the same kinds of steps. So you're initially not aware. You don't even know that you're underselling yourselves until someone says that to us. And Ron and I have been on review meetings from the course that we offer feedback on our 4 steps together. And people will say, Sue, I didn't even know that I could say that. I didn't know I was underselling myself. The next stage is awareness. As they start to hear more about it or people talk to them about it, they become aware. But we all know from behavior change, or many of us know, that there's a gap moving from awareness to doing. So the applying phase is really taking that awareness, learning more about it, doing it, and using it. And it's not an easy stair-step down process because it then requires you to get to where the habit is built. Now, there's a back and forth between applying what you're learning and doing and using and the habit being built. And when you have new skills or a new job, you go back and forth on those parts of the timeline, the continuum again. Ultimately, in the course over and over again, and many of my individual mentee interactions over the almost 2 decades now, tell me that they don't have much confidence initially. And I thought to myself, oh, that's good. And then I started thinking about and researching self-advocacy, and I thought it was important to bring this up to you. The 2 areas are intertwined. It is very difficult, as I talked about last time, to getting a specific definition of how the intertwining of these 2 things go. So I'm going to tell you how I interpret it. You can have confidence or not much confidence and still advocate for yourself. So it's not totally that you have to be confident to self-advocate, because I've seen women who are not confident in their careers who are out there on the front lines of protesting. For example, in this big science-related protest almost a decade ago down in Washington, holding up signs. They're clearly able to advocate for that, but not for themselves. You have to have some confidence. And people who tell me they aren't confident, there's also an element of they're afraid to recognize it verbally or to someone else because they think maybe they're overreaching. So there's lots of things that our mind plays mind games with us. But the self-advocacy is the doing and using and getting comfortable owning it. So how do we claim our credit? I realize I've never quite described it this way, but I'd first like to know whether and how often, if you'll just put in the chat, you undersell yourself. I'm curious about whether the others here think that they've been able to not necessarily conquer it, but it's mostly that you don't undersell yourself. I will, so let's see, not often enough. Good, Ron, thank you for that. I have a similar thought, Ron, when I'm on with certain of the LinkedIn experts and career coaches. I'm more likely to undersell what I actually do, especially if it's in a large group of introductions. The person says they undersell themselves in interviews, less in other venues. Thank you for that particular area. I think that's a really important point, that job seekers may know that they're underselling, but not want to overclaim in an interview. I know people are very careful about not saying something that could be misconstrued. So I offering something that I developed because as I was going through the book writing, I thought we really need to have something that gives people a sense, just like we do when I start these sessions, when I ask you a question to get your brain engaged around the topic. So this is what I call a quiz. It's not been tested, validated. It's the kinds of questions and statements that I think reflect either an A for self-advocacy or a C for confidence. If you're interested in taking the quiz, great. You can get it at bit.ly/pom-pom quiz, or just reach out to me and I'll send you the link. And you would just score it. This is meant to be in the book of before and after. And if you're interested in taking it, I'd love it if you'd share any of your scores with me and any reactions that you have. We're not going to take time today to do it, but I wanted to let you know that I think it's a way to bring things to the front, you know me, the front brain, even though it's not anatomically correct. So we claim our credit. There's three sort of steps. And again, you go back and forth between them, among them. But the first thing is that you can't really be confident and have a lot of self-advocacy if you don't take time to reflect before you tailor your resume. I can't tell you the number of people that I work with in various job-seeking groups, and they say, Sue, we just lost our job, or they tell the leader, oh, I just lost my job, and I envision them having gotten the news the day before and doing this in some version. But it's not that they don't have evidence. It's just that they pull out their resume in the heat of needing to do something. And I understand how frantic it is right now. But they haven't reflected since the last time they tried to get a job. And sometimes that's a year or 2 years. And we all know how things can change over that time. You've heard me talk before about verbal self-reflection. And that, I think, is important and will help you surface more evidence and outcomes. I thank Peter for your comment on the early book about putting in finding a mentor. It was an obvious thing once you said it that I hadn't even thought about that when we talk about always be looking, always be ready. And I talk about even now, you can think about doing verbal self-reflection differently. I haven't tried this in great detail, but I think that AI could help you get started. If, for example, you don't have a mentor or you don't feel comfortable saying certain things to someone that you know who might be a peer who's also job seeking, it can help you clarify your thinking, identify priorities, reframe language. And for the opportunity, if you're interested in trying this with whatever I have ChatGPT up here only because that was the only tool that has photographs of it. But I think this is the case for when you want to turn on the microphone and have yourself talk and not be writing and editing what you're saying. So let me know how that goes. I'm going to be experimenting more with it as well. The second part of this is once you've identified evidence, and basically that first step is refreshing yourself. Oh, what have I done lately? What else do I need to add? I know Peter said he just got back from more of his teaching, and I'm looking forward, Peter, to how much you've really learned and made a difference in the last, it's almost 2 years now that you're doing this, I think. All right, so taking ownership of your results. That means things like showing what contributions you've made. So in this case, it looked like the man is an artist. We don't always have things we can show, but we can show in telling or talking about our results, what we've done and how we've done it. And in this case, the women all look pretty comfortable talking to each other. So hopefully I think they all have some things they're exchanging information on. And the third one is now making that habit seat itself. I don't know a better word than habituating, making the communicating the results a habit that you do. And I know it feels like, oh, Sue's talking again about the 8,000th award she won and how many hours of recordings she's done, whatever I annoy people with. But you can start with things like, let me tell you about that. That always says to people, oh, there's going to be something interesting coming. And then they prime themselves to listen to you because you're saying, oh, there's going to be something interesting. Not always, but they're getting your attention. And the second thing about claiming your credit is, again, reminding you, you are stating facts. When you talk about an award, when you talk about getting IRB approval after 3 months, when you talk about finishing your dissertation, all of these things are facts. You have done something, and it's okay to acknowledge it, but frame it in a way that the other side of the convo can hear it, not, oh, I finally finished my dissertation. And people are, I'm seeing that on threads, which is very informal. And that's great. I try to celebrate them. But when they're talking about finishing the dissertation, that's not the point. The point is, I'm excited about the research I did into X topic, and we found Y results, and that's going to be able to help the Z population get whatever they need. So it's a way that you can use it to show your contributions to a larger mission, a larger role, a larger project. And we're already at what should you do? It's going to be very similar to what we just talked about. I'll give you some actions. So here's the continuum of what we just talked about, that you have to value your experience, take ownership of results, and then habituate communicating these results. So let's go through what are some of the ideas that I put together in case these are things you want to work on. As you value the experience you already have, you're going to be doing both identifying your evidence and also using verbal self-reflection. If you don't have a mentor, maybe you have a peer, an accountability peer, or someone you meet with regularly, or someone you know long distance from Zoom. Make it a habit, especially if you're job seeking, if you're looking for a promotion, if you want to get more comfortable in your own self-advocacy, see if there's someone you can work with in person. And in person meaning in real screen life if it's distance. But also try AI and see if AI can help you feel more comfortable. It's taken me over a year, as for some reason in the last year, I've had more meetings that I go to where I'm asked to introduce myself. And I finally don't panic. I get it out. It comes out differently each time, but I'm able to do that without tripping up and going off on a tangent. And for me, that's a big part of valuing my experience and realizing I can do that. When we talk about you now taking ownership of it, I want you to specify it, even things that are anonymous. Peter, for example, as a contractor, what can he talk about? Ron, with his role in mentoring in different countries, with me, with job seekers, with others in leadership, there's more that Ron could talk about that will help people understand. And again, this anonymous also reminds me to mention that it's all right to acknowledge a team, but remember to be specific about the expertise that you brought, because when you bring it, that means you're bringing something no one else can do or that you complement someone else. Making a habit of it, say yes to everything you can. I made this an intention 4 or 5 years ago that I was going to say yes as often as I could. And it's been fun. People come to town and I will drive into DC to meet them. Someone asked me to talk in Italy. It was by long distance. It was a Zoom call, but we were going to be traveling and I got them to agree to let me tape record it because I felt comfortable asking them, can I tape it and you play it? The person who was presenting wanted me to talk about LinkedIn. Because that's what gives you the confidence and the self-advocacy. So you feel like this. I asked Google, who used Nano Banana 2 to generate a person who felt very confident and also had self-advocacy. It wasn't, the Google told me, oh, it should be like a fire burning in the heart. And I thought, oh, that'd be cute to have a little fire in my chest. No, anyway, this was the view of it. I thought it was good. It was certainly better than anything I could come up with. But the more opportunities you take to express things out loud, to put them in writing on LinkedIn, in different communiques, maybe you have a weekly newsletter that you read and you want to let the person know how valuable it was to you, whatever they told you that week, you could write back and also explain why it was so valuable and what you do. Things like that even give you a chance to practice that. So I'm going to leave this here for a minute or two and ask you, which one of these are you going to focus on? Valuing experience, taking ownership of results, or habituating communicating results? Or maybe all three. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious about which area really spoke to you where you said, oh, I need to move forward on this. I want to habituate communicating results like posting on LinkedIn. I love that. I hope you'll do more, Peter. I know the ones you have posted have been fascinating. Habituation, says Ron. And interestingly enough, as I looked at this, I wasn't thinking about this when I was putting it together, but I just looked at this now and I thought, I'm not taking my own advice of making sure that I refresh where I am right now, not where I was last week or a month ago. And I need to go back and put some more thought into how I'm going to communicate some of the newer experience that we have. Ron and I have done, we're doing the month of August live teaching to talk about in a quick way for each of the 4 steps in the professional presence course what's changed and then any specifics. Last week we did step 1 with work trends and then step 1. So the revised BioPara recipe, but also the reason for it and what it means for the way in which we communicate. And we'll do step 2 this week. So thank you, everybody. So just a reminder before I ask Ron for comments, the takeaway is claim your credit. This is really about saying Sue wants you to plant a flag, plant a seed, plant whatever you want, plant something that holds you firmly on ground that you feel comfortable so you can stand in your brilliance. Ron, do you have comments?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's this business of when you're expressing your accomplishments and depending on the environment. So this business of habituating, I put that in. I said that's an interesting thing is get practiced in doing it in other settings, really what it comes down to for me, because I'm not in the job market, but explaining to people what it is that I do. And so it's interesting because sometimes if you're doing that in a quasi-public area, you're explaining something and a third party comes in and listening and says that he's bragging because others don't understand. And so it's an interesting challenge between having a confident ability to explain your accomplishments so that folks can understand what you bring to the situation and then seeming to be overly confident. I guess that's the other side of it. And so for me, I'm quite comfortable in my own skin. And so I'm quite happy to explain. And when I have difficulties, I like to share that too, and so on. But it's when you've had a extreme of success and you're explaining it. So sometimes that can be a kind of an interesting issue. Secondly, it had to do with when working with an AI colleague, something that occurred to me as you're explaining some things, Sue, was this idea if you're going to use the AI as a reflector, it occurred to me that by supplying a model to the AI tool prior to you engaging it, for example, the OATS model. In other words, you say, I'm trying to put together an accomplishment statement, and here's the OATS model that I would like it to be. Here's some samples of some other stuff, maybe a sample. Share that with your AI cohort or colleague, and then you go ahead and do it. And so that the tool could then apply those parameters to assist you in doing that. And so it's something I've done a couple of times where it's not quite in the same context of trying to come up with a description, but I know that in coming up with ideas where I wanted to reflect a certain style or whatever. For example, when I was doing analysis of a set of conversations on Zoom, and then I said I wanted to present something, and I said, here, would you use the style of this individual in order to do it? So there's the kinds of things that you can do. And my experience is AI can do that quite well. And it's quite able to sense those sorts of things. It's not perfect, but it's an interesting thing. So to reflect who you are and how you are and how you express yourself and then still stay within, say, the OATS model or whatever. Anyway, those are some thoughts.
Yeah, I love both of those. I love the idea of a model. I was thinking like more free form, like oftentimes people want a phone call with me initially or a Zoom call because they're reaching out and they're confused and they're not asking me to be their mentor usually because they don't know what I offer. But I think you're right in some of the examples, even when I said it can help you identify priorities, all that. Yes, I think giving a model is a great idea. I like that. And I think the habituating is links back to sharing your value. Think about where you and I were almost 6 years ago, 5 years ago, after we'd met and began to work together. It's things have changed a lot, and how you and I work together has changed a lot. And you're, as we're doing this 4 week thing, which I need to write about in LinkedIn. It's for me, it's like I could write about it on LinkedIn, or I could prepare for, I've got to talk tomorrow night, and then we have our joint presentation on Thursday. And I get lazy because I'm retired and I don't, no one's paying me to produce it. But I think it's the habituating is where, like going to the gym every day, or I say I'm supposed to do 2 yoga poses every morning. I haven't done them today, but I did them yesterday. I'll get to it. So I think it's a constant battle, if you will. But with talking about and writing about what we've done and the results we've produced, that brings almost the equivalent of what it's like to work out and be in good shape or to change your diet and better nutrition. It really gives you not just visibility among others, but it also gives you the more solid platform on which I view different people have written about self advocacy and confidence in a loop and how they feed on each other. But I don't think you can advocate for yourself without some examples and some strong grounding. So I'm going to ask
Yeah.
Peter if you, oh, go ahead,
Okay.
Ron.
I just want to have a quick comment on the
Yeah.
habituating.
Yeah.
One thing to remember about habituating something is it means there was an old habit. And so
Yeah.
it has to go away in order for the new habit, the one that you want to promote and the one that you want to become a habit. It's usually to replace something. And that there's an old habit and there's an old way of talking about myself. And so I now need to have a different type of habit. And I have to caution myself not to fall back into the old style where
Yeah.
I used to just talk in wishy-washy language or whatever.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yes, that's exactly it. It's replacing the old habit. Peter, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'd just say that I don't see your guys' posts on LinkedIn as as a bragging, but especially working with you, I see it a little bit more of modeling what you would like to see us do. And just knowing that I'm trying to be a little bit better at it too and saying, okay, yeah, I could say a little bit more about my classes or about this or that I've done. I think it's not necessarily bragging, but I think that it comes across in the tone and from knowing you guys too. But yeah, I think that the way I need to get better, I put it in the chat there, but making sure that I know how to do it well in an interview when I have a good prepared answer for some of the questions, but some of the more on the fly things that they might want, I might not always remember how to tie something in or bring a couple of things up that really would have sold it. And I guess you kind of always have that and think back, oh, I really should have said this.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a little bit of practice and getting better at it.
I like that. I love it actually, and I appreciate that you shared that. That there are always things we can do better, and
Yeah.
part of it is having to remind ourselves that our 100% doesn't need to be 100% all the time. Even in an interview, there's always going to be some question. It's going to be either the question itself or the person who's asking it, its personalities too, that are hard. And I'm getting more and more reports on the weekly meeting for job seekers that I help on, that there are more and more detailed AI screening, not just screening, but content and topical interviews. They don't explain a lot because we can't go into it, but asking coders, how would you handle this? It's clear that the companies are trying to use AI interviews to get to a certain depth level of a topic, like can this coder really do something, before we even talk to them for a direct screening interview with a hiring manager. So I appreciate you sharing that, because this, in this case, applies a lot for job seeking, but it's actually everything we do. I will often hear my husband talk about things that predate when he and I met. He did some great, very interesting things in his career. And I keep saying to him, I hope you've told your kids about this. Do they understand how brilliant you are? He still is, but he's not doing satellite communications anymore. And so when the kids come over, I try to remember to ask them, has your dad told you about this? I hope you've written down that he got X and Y awards, or that he got this scholarship when he went to college and stuff. And all of those things I think are hard, because he doesn't mind talking about it, but he feels like if he brings it up, it will be almost like bragging or listen to me, I'm your dad kind of thing. So I think we all have the challenge of learning how to do it in a way that feels comfortable. I don't love the term authentic, but in this case, authentic to each of us. I can write stuff on LinkedIn and put photos up, but most of what I try to write about is hopefully someone else's great things that they've done, or meetups or whatever. And I think that's just where you have to decide how comfortable you are on which platform and what you want to do with it. As Ron said, he and I are not job seekers, so we don't have quite the pressure to get our expertise out there. But we want, at the same time, to have some level of recognition when people like you, Peter, who now know us, new Peters come into the course, or Ron meets them in the course of what he does as well. You want them to have some confidence that you can find us on LinkedIn, or find us in the global world, or among a network of friends. And as I've said to you before, Peter, you've got such an interesting experience right now with the CDC epidemiology you're teaching in Micronesia. And it just feels like a way to feature an under-recognized, untalked about area of the world. And whether it's US government contributions, just these people and what they're trying to do, and how they take advantage of learning situations, as I think most people do around the world when they're offered to them. Let me stop there and see if anybody has any last comments. All right, Ron, will you close the meeting, please?
Yeah, thanks very much for attending today, and for those who are going to be looking at this recording later on. It's an interesting subject, and it has its challenges. It's not overly complicated getting the advice from you, Sue, but the actual practical part of implementing the advice is a whole different kettle of fish, and it's so important. And I'm so glad that you brought it up for us today. Thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody near the end of September.
That's right. Thank you. Take care, Peter.
Bye, Sue. Bye, Ron.
Bye.